It's the biggest game of the season. It's 6 points between Leicester City and Everton. This is going to be a big one and a fun one. Here's the match preview for the big game on Saturday. Hello and welcome to the latest in my match previews. And today we're going to be looking at an absolutely huge game between Leicester and Everton. The last time we played Everton, we drew 2-2. It was Jordan Pickford with James Maddison's penalty details on the water bottle. He makes the save. It's 2-2. And I think that was the biggest result that meant that we went down rather than Everton. Can we get our revenge, or will it be more sticky toffee syndrome for us? Let's find out. Taking a look at the table, as you can see, this is why it's big. It's 15th versus 20th, but there's only 2 points that separate us. Were we to win, we'd make 5 points clear of Everton with 5 games gone of the season. That would be unbelievable. If they win, they're actually above us. If it's a draw, it's as you were. I don't think that's really a good result for either team, but let's see how it goes. I think all fans are saying that if there's ever a game that we had to win, this is the one. Right, let's take a look at some of Everton's recent form. Now, the TLDR is they've lost all their league games this season, and they've in fact lost their last cup game midweek to Southampton too. They did win earlier in the season against Doncaster, but it's fair to say they've been struggling. But they have been scoring goals. So I don't think this game is as trivial as people might think it is, but let's take a look at why. So here was their last game against Aston Villa, which finished 3-2 to Villa. And yeah, of course, Everton have actually taken a 2-goal lead in their last 2 games and still end up losing in the Premier League, which is crazy. But I want to draw your attention to 2 things. One is the fact that Everton are scoring goals. They are doing that quite consistently, a bit like us. So it's not like they are totally awful, which is what I think some people think they are just because they're bottom. But I will say in all of these, take a look at those possession stats. Just 27.1% there in that particular game. Then against Bournemouth, this is at home. This one's a lot closer, but Bournemouth still had more possession and Bournemouth had the more expected goals, even though, as crazy as this is, they didn't have a shot on target until the 81st minute. 2-0 down and win 3-2. Absolutely insane. But perhaps it shows you that even though that was a little bit of a freak result, still, in the generality of the game, they didn't hold on to the ball too much. And that's going to be a theme that we're going to come to a little bit later. Against Spurs, this was a real battering. I think this puts into perspective our result against Spurs, although admittedly we had them at home, not away like Everton did. But again, look how little possession they had, 29.5%. They did actually, though, have quite a good XG. They should have scored a goal there, and maybe Spurs outdid theirs, but still pretty bruising encounter there, 4-0 then. And I don't have XG for this one, but here we can take a look at their last game against Southampton in the Cup. And it was 1-1, finished then to Southampton won it on penalties. But again, look at the possession. So Southampton have just come up, and we know that Russell Martin loves to play that heavy possession style, especially circulating the ball between their defensive line. But 74.1% possession away from home for a team that's just come up from the Championship. And my understanding is they played a lot of their reserves too. So that's crazy. And if you listen to a lot of the Everton fans, they're like, what is going on? We're not even trying to play football, which is a bit insane to say. So we can see there's a theme. They don't have too much of the ball. Why is that? We're going to look into that in a moment. But let's talk about someone who, in my opinion, is a Premier League icon. It's a gravel voice himself, Sean Dyche. He's been linked with Leicester quite a few times. He's had quite a few run-ins with us as well. If you remember when we won the Championship, not the last time round, but the previous time round, under Nigel Pearson, Burnley finished second, and I think he was pretty salty about that. And, you know, we did have that season therefore afterwards where they went down instead of us. And, you know, we've had quite a few encounters with Dyche over the years. He got his revenge last year, to be fair. And this is the lineup that he's been using in games recently. And it's kind of interesting. I think one thing that I think quite surprising is, given that we last played them 2 years ago, is how little they've really refreshed their squad. So the main man I still would say is Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who's an England international up front. I'm kind of surprised he's still at Everton, but he's had some injury problems. Jack Harrison, who almost signed for Leicester, actually, if you remember, in that fateful January transfer window, but he stayed at Leeds and now has ended up at Everton. He's on the wing. Ilman Ndiaye is a new signing that they signed in the summer, was at Sheffield United, then went to Marseille, didn't quite work out in France, but he's been brought back in and has actually been pretty reasonable for them. Dwight McNeil, he's still in the team, the Burnley favourite, but interestingly, he's been moved to the number 10 position. We'll come to that in a moment. In defensive midfield, they've got Idrissa Gana Gueye, who is the player that infamously Steve Walsh said was going to be the N'Golo Kante replacement, but he went to Everton instead of us. And they've got Tim Irobegnum. I'm not saying his name particularly well, but Irobegnum, He was actually at loan at QPR last season, I believe, and did quite well for them. So they signed him from Villa, and I believe he's been one of their more impressive players and maybe one of their sort of starring role type players. I will say, though, that he's their replacement for Amadou Onana, and although he's had a decent start to his season, Onana's playing for Villa now, scored against us, and it's quite a step down. And otherwise, if you look at their back five, I mean, it's quite shocking to see that Michael Keane and Ashley Young are still lining up for them. Jordan Pickford has been in the Premier League for ages, and I think has probably kept Everton up a lot. But he has, pros and cons to his game. Tarkowski, he was linked with Leicester a few seasons ago too. He'd have been a good signing. And Mikalenko, who I'm not the biggest fan of, but seems to have secured the left back position there for Everton. But they line up in a 4-2-3-1. So people that think that Sean Dyche is all about 4-4-2, Brexit ball, direct balls only. No, he's adapted his game. They do a lot more than that. And even though I've said they don't have that much possession, I'm going to explain why that is in a little while. But they play a fairly sophisticated Premier League ready 4-2-3-1. Right. If you talk about Sean Dyche, one thing, other than recently, is he's great at sorting out the defence. That's something that's always been his strength. And that's why it's a bit surprising that they've been conceding so many goals this season, because last season, I think they had the fourth or fifth best defence in the entire league. And that's normally what they're kind of capable of. But let's still take a look at how he lines up. So in general, they play a compact block. But what I would say is that Everton aren't necessarily a team that just sits in a deep block for the entirety of the game. So this is actually Aston Villa, and this is John Duran, who's probably scored what's going to be the goal of the season, where he hits it from here and it somehow goes in with his weaker foot, would you believe? Insane. Great goal from him. But if you look at how they've lined up here, they're not parking up the bus here. They've pushed up. Maybe there's a ball that could be played over the top, but they are trying to step up and trying to, move the opposition off them. So they're not just, bus parkers. Here again, here's against Spurs. This actually led to a good chance for Spurs. And what's happened here is that they managed to play a ball over the top. And you can see they've actually tried to step up. And here you've got one of the attackers has managed to go through. I think this is Maddison, and find the gap in between. But you're seeing again that although this is a Sean Dyche team, they're not just sitting back and just saying, try and beat our super low block. Like a lot of the time we played against championship teams last year, they're trying to be more aggressive and they're trying to play more of a standard 4-2-3-1. It's definitely not a high line. Don't get me wrong. It's not a high line like what Palace or certainly Villa played, but they are trying to be more progressive in their style. So Dyche has evolved his style of play and his tactics. But that said, I'm not going to say that they never sit deep. But all teams will do this when you're in defensive shape. If it's come off a corner or something similar, they will, of course, play two banks of four and the two men up front, defending the 4-4-2 shape here. McNeil's gone up to kind of support the striker there, and they'll defend in the compact, resolute block. And generally, they do have kind of warriors at the back. And this is something that, especially those players that came from Burnley with Dyche, so that's going to be Tarkowski, Dwight McNeil, players like that, they've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and they're willing to throw their body on the line. Now, are their bodies now sort of letting them down a little bit? Maybe that's one of the reasons why they're struggling. But they normally are quite good in this phase of the game, and it means you've got to be a bit cute in terms of trying to score against them. Let's move on to some of their attacking play. And here I've highlighted Calvert-Lewin, who has scored already 2 goals to them, same as Jamie Vardy. And yeah, this is another thing that I think may surprise people about Everton these days. They do press. They're definitely not the highest intensers. They're not trying to sort of compact the game and push right upfield. They pick their moments, and they do tend to press more, I would say, in the mid block. So they sort of, let's say where this defender is here, that's probably as far as they would push up to press, rather than pushing right onto the keeper. But they pick their moments and they're pretty good at it. So in this example against Spurs, Papa Sarr's got the ball. He's been pressed by 3 players, another one's kind of surrounding him. And because Ange likes to play out from the back, he's trying to play the ball blindly across the field to one of these other midfielders or defenders who can pick up the ball. But he can see Dwight McNeil, who's been played in that central position, is charging forward, and he ends up receiving the ball, and he almost gets in to score there. So it shows you that they are willing to try and pick your pocket at the right times. They pick their moments, but they are good. And I've said quite a few times now that I feel Steve Cooper's turned Leicester into a good team on transition. Given that he's only been with us for 4 games in the Premier League, that's definitely the strength of our game, is we are quite efficient on transition and look quite deadly. I don't think Everton are anywhere near as good as what we've shown so far, but they are capable and they are scoring goals from doing this. So we have to take them seriously. Speaking of Dwight McNeil, I wouldn't say he's their star player, but he's definitely one to watch. As mentioned, he's been moved into the middle, and that's unusual because before he used to play as a winger. And in fact, he again was another player that was linked with Leicester a few seasons ago. And he's never really sort of done more than sort of 3 goals and 3 assists in a season. But I've always felt that's not because of the individual, but because he's playing in a system and lineup that doesn't really suit his game. So he's actually been moved into the number 10 position, and he's actually started to play pretty well. I think we do have to watch out for him. So this will be something that I think either Skip or Winks will need to be a bit wary of. Here he picks up the ball against Spurs from the last example, like I say, and drives on. Yep, here he is in the number 10 position, as you can see. But here's the goal against Villa. So they went 2-0 up against Villa. And how do they get their first goal? Well, McNeil manages to rob one of the defenders off the ball as they're pushing up. He turns. He's got Calvert-Lewin there, but he says, get out of my way. Pushes on, and he hits the ball from here. And it's a great finish into the back of the net with his trusty left foot. And they're 1-0 up. And they had a good game. And yeah, he's pretty effective. So we've got to watch out for Dwight McNeil, left-footed player. And more than just that, McNeil has always been known for his crossing. And here you can see that even though he's a 10, in this passage of play, he's drifted out onto the right-hand side. And now he's crossed the ball in with his left foot, and he's causing like a direct threat. And yeah, this is one thing, though, that I think that Dyche teams are never going to be shy of. And that's putting it in the mixer and putting some crosses in. And for that reason, I think their star man is Dominic Calvert-Lewin. He's struggled a bit with injuries over the last few seasons, but on his day, he is a good player and he is a consistent scorer for Everton. And I think one of the reasons why they still have a chance of staying up if he stays fit. Here is his stats that I've taken off FB Ref, and he's kind of got an interesting profile because this is his sort of radar chart, and this doesn't really scream out elite. He's got a crazy amount of clearances, but that probably just shows you a team that defends a lot, right? Because you can't clear the ball if you're playing up a striker. It means that he's heading the ball out when defending from corners. I do think they're fairly stable on corners. But the biggest thing is here, look at here on the left, at the bottom left here, aerials 1 in the top percentile for winning it in the air. So this guy, they're going to feed him crosses and he can head it in. And so that means when we defend, we've got to be careful of him. Now, I think Calvert-Lewin isn't the fastest, but he can dominate in the air. And that does pose a question to Cooper. He has recently been going for Okoli and Fass. He could play Vestergaard. Now, maybe Everton aren't the fastest, so you could put Vestergaard in. But Vestergaard, despite his size, isn't actually the best in terms of aerial clearances. So that's something to be careful of. That said, Okoli, who I've been quite impressed by recently, has shown a little bit of a weakness in the air. I don't want to say that he's bad, but I'm saying if you're going against a Premier League striker who's up in the top percentile for aerial dominance, that's something that needs to be considered. So I'll be interested to see how we approach the game. And yeah, just to say that Everton are always going to be a threat on set pieces when you've got someone as good as this, and we'll have to have someone watching him. I suspect it'll be Wolfden Diddy on set pieces who's up against Calvert-Lewin. That's what I would do, but we have seen craziness already this season, like Bobby de Cordova-Reid trying to mark their tallest player. We've seen it a number of times, so that makes me a bit nervous. Right, I want to come on to then the fact that Everton, they're bottom of the league, and why are they struggling? Because this is quite a surprise. Last season, they had 2 points deductions and yet still ended up being comfortably clear from bottom. In fact, if they hadn't had the points deductions, they wouldn't have been too far away from Europe. And I think given the fact that they would have been in contention, they might even have made a late run for it. So Dyche did a great job for them last season. Why all of a sudden have they started going downhill? That's quite an interesting thing to gather. And I think there's some clear reasons. Normally, when I do this part of it, I like to talk about how teams build up, right? Last time round for Palace, I showed all their nice patterns of play, the way that they would use their double pivot, the use of Adam Wharton, Will Hughes, Decore, many players that they could use. But the thing with Everton is I think their build up, there ain't one. Temporary closed for construction. In fact, maybe not even temporary. Maybe it's just closed. The reason why this team struggles and the reason why they're so bad with possession is they just can't do it. They lack the builders. I think in Idrissa Gana Gueye and Irabignum, they've got 2 players who are combative. They're good at tackling. They're good at winning the ball back. But I think they are not comfortable at receiving the ball, turning or playing. And in fact, I don't think any of their players in their team are good at doing that. And even though I've just given Dwight McNeil a big shout out there, I don't think that Dwight McNeil is the answer as like a creative 10, as someone who can get the ball and turn. I think he's there more just for the fact that he's got good technique and he's got a good left foot. But I don't think he's someone that can play in between spaces. Although maybe you could say the same about Wilfred Ndidi. So here in my example is one of the times where Everton have the ball comfortably in their own half and they're looking to build. So here I've got Michael Keane on the ball and he plays the ball in, and this is Ilman Ndiaye who's come back. But what's happened with the way the pass is and the way that it's been shadowed is Villa end up winning the ball. And in fact, even if he's got the ball here and Ndiaye, what's he going to do? The only option really for him here is he has to play the ball into Idrissa Gana Gueye here. And then Villa have got three people around him who are going to snap and compress and try and press him. And he's not going to be the best at playing out. So this is something where they're getting targeted. Is basically, they are good actually at defending. They make a lot of tackles. They make a lot of clearances. But the problem is that what do they do with the ball once they get the ball out of pressure? They just give it back again. And Jordan Pickford is a great shot stopping keeper, but he's not good with his feet. He's not good at playing out of spaces. And even his long balls, they're just hitting hopes for Calvert-Lewin. So it just means that they just keep seeing wave and wave of pressure coming against them. Funny enough, it's a bit like what happened to Leicester against Palace. When we made the subs and we went 5-3-2 and we had no outlet, we just couldn't make any threat, right? The ball just kept coming back at us over and over again. And Everton just start that way pretty much, and how it continues. Here's another example. So again, from the Villa game, and again, it's Michael Keane. He's got the ball. And what's he going to do with it here? Well, his option is he's just going to try and play it through the line. So they're trying to go for like quick vertical transitions, which can work. That's actually how we play as well. But, other teams, he might be more inclined to play the ball here, look to his fullback and try and make some space and play out of traffic. Instead, he plays the ball long, but it's easy. It's got to be a really good ball to get to Calvert-Lewin here. And even though he's a good player, what's he really going to be able to do? Maybe hold it up, even if it's on the floor, kind of hold up. He doesn't have that much pace, so he's unlikely going to be able to spin you and get him behind. And you can see in this shot as well that who's even supporting him? There's no one even there supporting him. Most other teams, when that ball would be played, you'd be able to spot 2-3 players, but the rest of them are all just defending. This is a 62 minutes gone. I appreciate that they've given away a 2-goal lead, but like if that's what you're doing, you're going to concede another one. And that's exactly what ended up happening. So it's just that lack of ability to play out. And I think this is where they really lack. I think, I hear a lot of Everton fans, and they really don't like Dyche. And I've got a lot of respect for Dyche. And there was even sometimes I thought it might be time for him to come to Leicester. But I'm not going to call him a dinosaur, but it's just a fact that he hasn't yet shown the ability to adapt to the modern game. And the modern game, because all teams pretty much press, is you need to be able to play through the press. That's basically, I think, the biggest change in the last 5 years, right? And you can see it even with our team, right? Like Winks and Skip, defensively, I would say are not as good as Idrissa Gana Gueye or Irabegnum. But in terms of being able to receive the ball, turn, play out, and make something happen, I back our two CDMs over theirs any day of the week, right? And in fact, that's one of the reasons why we've had more success pushing Ndidi up rather than keeping him back, because we're trying to focus on the positives of the game rather than the negative. And so this is something that they really struggle with. But it's not just those two double pivots. I mean, I'm giving them a lot of flack, but same with their defenders. I think if Jared Branthwaite is back for them, that's a huge difference, because he's one of the few players that's shown he's comfortable with the ball at his feet, and he's a left footer. But I'm guessing he won't be 100% match fit even if he is back. So that's, again, something that we could target. Here's another example. Again, they've managed to recover the ball. They got it fairly comfortably in their area. What are they going to do with the ball? It breaks to Irabegnum. He gets the ball. And again, they're just looking for the fast vertical transition. So he's going to play the ball long. Too easy to cut out. Villa have got the ball, turn around, attack again. And that was the story of the game. In fact, even when they were 2-0 down, yeah, Everton had scored and they'd done well to make the most of their chances. But basically, it just kept coming back to them over and over again. So really, they're caught in between these phases where, yes, sometimes they'll press, they'll rob the ball back, and they even are capable of scoring. But the rest of the time, they're defending. And I think, to be honest with you, that Everton in the league are the worst team at going back to front right now. That's what they can't do. They're actually okay when they've got the ball in the front. They're actually okay when they're at the back defending. But football's about going back to front, and they can't do it. That's why they're struggling. How they fix it? Well, I actually think that the loss of Amadou Onana is huge. I think that is the big reason, because he was someone that could both win the ball, and then when he received the ball, he could actually play a little bit out of traffic. So he was a very good player for them, and that's why Villa has spent 50 million on him, and he was very good against us, we've got to say. And yeah, the two players that they've got in to replace him, they aren't capable of doing that. So speaking of that, what is the key battle? How do I think we're going to win the game? And I think it's between these two, the battle of the N'Golo Kante replacements, as I called him earlier. So you got Ndidi versus Idrissa Gana Gueye. Now, should we even start Ndidi in this game? I was on Fox's Den yesterday with Locks, and we were talking about this. And, would you not want a creative player there who can play in between lines? Because we're going to get to that. That's the way that Everton set up, is you might want more of your creative players. But I just think that Ndidi against Palace was unbelievable. Not just for the 2 assists. He didn't put a foot wrong while he was on the pitch. He was absolutely brilliant, and he was winning the ball back. And where I think we can get some success, now this actually, funnily enough, is what Fulham earlier on in the season, and this is before Skip was starting for us, we're doing to Ndidi. So at this point, Ndidi was playing as part of the double pivot. And here you can see that what happened is Fulham were blocking off the passing lane to Winks. So you can see that Hermansen can't play a ball to him, but they were leaving the passing lane to Ndidi open. So they're saying, you pass the ball to Ndidi, because as soon as he gets it, we're going to rush the ball off you. And that's basically what I think we should do to Everton. And actually, I think it doesn't matter if it's Idrissa Gana Gueye or Irabegunum, but I think Idrissa, just because he's a bit older, therefore a bit slower, is the one to target. So we should actually leave that lane open, try and tempt them into pass it, and get Wilf to win the ball off them. Wilf actually did an amazing job against Adam Wharton on the weekend. Given that teams have been talking about Adam Wharton going for 60 to 70 million, he lost the battle against Ndidi, who spun him and left him for dead multiple times and dominated him in the air. So which one of you two is the N'Golo Kante replacement? I'm backing our man Ndidi. I think that's a key area of the game that we can target. And I think we should start Ndidi for that reason, because I think for the first half an hour to 45 minutes, we want to get on top of the game. I definitely think there is the high likelihood that we end up in a position where we're getting 60 to 70% of possession. And then it's a case of, okay, we've got the ball, but what can we do with it? But let's not take anything for granted. We've got to get into that position first before we can start dominating. And for that reason, what's the team lineup? Now, there's what I would do, and there's what I think Steve Cooper will do. And this is what I think Steve Cooper will do. Because, if this was me, I would find place for Ricardo. I would probably drop Christensen. I would do quite a few changes. But given the system that Cooper plays, what I think he'll do is basically keep the same team as last week, but with one change. Last week, he started Ayew instead of Fatawu. But this time round, I think he will start Buonanotte. Now, you could actually make the argument that Fatawu would be really good, especially if he's going to be up against Mykolenko, who I don't think is necessarily the fastest defender, and he might be able to skin him one-on-one. But we can always do that later in the game. Buonanotte, he's creative. He's already scored for us this season. He's shown he's very good on the ball. I think he can show you that he's physical presence and he's good at winning the ball back. So I think if he's paired with Ndidi, that gives us a little bit of the devil and the delight, if that makes sense. That Ndidi can win the ball, be pressing, win aerial battles if need be to get the knockdowns. And then Buonanotte and Mavididi can be there to create. Mavididi, I want to see him running at Ashley Young as much as possible, or whoever they're playing at right back position, because it could be Seamus Coleman if it's not Ashley Young. Just take them on. You can beat them all day, every day, and they could get a lot of joy from them there. One thing I will say is that we have most games been using Christensen to attack down the left-hand side. Actually, in the last game, we seem to use Justin more than Christensen. And therefore, you could make the argument of, should it be Justin or should it be Ricardo? For me, who I'm going to choose all day, every day. And I think especially if Buonanotte's in the team, it makes even more sense for Ricardo to be in. And I think Ricardo would be a great player to have it. But just the fact that Cooper doesn't seem to like Ricardo, I think he's going to go with Justin. And this is what we'll see. Should we be playing Bilal El Khanous? Can definitely make the argument for it. Should we be playing Yannick Vestergaard? Can definitely make the argument for it. If this was Enzo, I think Enzo would make mincemeat out of Everton in this game. And how he would do it is he would just get heavy possession, shift the ball from side to side, and basically just try to isolate one of our wingers versus one of those fullbacks. Because if it's Mavididi versus Young, or would be Fatawu versus Mykolenko, I would back our wingers to beat them. Not every time, but they only need to beat them once or twice to win the game. And that would probably work pretty well. But it's not Maresca, it's Steve Cooper. And Steve Cooper, I think has been getting maybe a bit of unfair flack, but he was too defensive in the previous game, especially after we took the lead. And that is the thing that we've got to watch out for. So, coming to the match predictions. What's going to make this game unique is this is going to be the only game this season where I expect the opposition to park the bus. I said that Everton don't really park the bus, but what I'm saying is I would be surprised if in the Premier League we have more possession in the game than the one we're about to come up to. we could hit 60 to 65% possession in this game. And I don't think we'll get that against any other team. Not against Southampton, who will have more possession than us, by the way, and not against Ipswich, where it might be a bit more 50-50, but we might have a bit more of the ball. This will be the one where we have to figure out how to unlock the puzzle. And that is maybe the one thing to be a bit wary of, because I think we have looked quite good in games so far. But I think it's because our style is effective against other Premier League teams because we're playing on transition. This game is going to be one of the few times where I say it's not going to be determined by moments of transition. This one, it is actually going to be about the next thing I said. We need to move the ball quickly between the half spaces to exploit Everton's slow defence. So when I've seen them get pasted, like for example at both Spurs and Brighton, which is another one that I didn't put in there, where they really struggled is as soon as the ball popped 1, 2, 3 really quickly, they just couldn't keep up with them, Everton. They're good at keeping their defensive shape, but it's hard to track runs over and over. And it's like, yeah, they might defend well for 20 minutes, but if they're always on the back foot and the ball's always being passed around them and they can't get the ball themselves because they can't get out, eventually you'll break them down. And so that's why coming to my third point here is this is a game where our creative players and those players who can pass are absolutely needed. Now, I will say that I think Skip and Winks here have a lot to play here. Winks is really good at making line-breaking passes. Skip, I think I've been very impressed by. I think he's actually been better than Winks since he's come into the team. And they will probably be able to push forward a lot more than they did previously because Everton will sit back a bit. So they themselves may be able to find those passes, which might mean we don't need to rely so much on the 10s. But I'm sure some people in their lineups will be saying, no, put Bilal in as the number 10. This game's made for him. And I agree, it is made for him. I'm not sure if Cooper wants to risk him right now. I think he'll come on more as an impact player and work his way into the team later. But if you started him, even if you withdrew Ndidi to start Bilal El Khanous, I would buy that argument. Listen, I can definitely understand why you would do that. Same even for Vestergaard, because if we're saying that they don't have that much pace on the break, even their wingers like Harrison and Ilman and Ndiaye and Dwight McNeil, I wouldn't say they're slow, but I don't think they're like, turbo boosters like some of the other wingers in the league. And what does Vestergaard give you? Well, if you're expecting to have loads of possession, he's really good on the ball and he can join in the attack and start pinging the passes around. So to be honest with you, it's not a bad idea to start someone like that. But look, what I want to make this clear, because I think there's like a mistaken assumption going around right now that this is going to be an easy win for Leicester, and I do not think that is the case, because although Everton are struggling, they carry a goal threat. It's not a walk in the park. Normally, when a team is rock bottom, they're both crap defensively and they can't score for toffee, but these toffees can score, so they've got something about them, right? And they're definitely in a bad patch right now. And listen, if they lose this game heavily, that could be the end of Sean Dyche. But I don't think that they are like, look, they're only 2 points worse than us. That's kind of my point. It's not like, okay, there's only been 4 games, but it's not like they've been truly, truly awful. And they, in fact, could have, with some, better game management, have more points than us right now. So that's something to be careful of. And yeah, that's why we have to be a little bit wary. And I think where my wariness comes from is what is Cooper going to do here? Because if Cooper tries to play an attritional game, which he has been doing so far, going more for transitions and winning the 50-50 battles, I actually think that style of play is going to suit Everton because they've got players who could deal with that. Whereas I think the teams that have had the most success of them are things like Unai Emery, Ange Postecoglou and Brighton. And all these guys play system football, and their system is based around trying to get overloads and 2v1s and exploiting the space. And a clever system like that is defeating Everton. That's why I feel like Enzo's system would probably, make mincemeat of them. But we have got the players, and Cooper has shown that he can adapt. So for that reason, I'm going to go 1-0. I think it'll be a harder game than people think. I think we will score. I think that if we do score, Cooper won't try and double his money. I don't think he'll necessarily be as defensive as last time around. I certainly hope not, because I think he threw away the points against Palace. But equally, I don't think he'll be looking necessarily to kill Everton off. And I think because it's a really important game already in the season, I think it's one of those where it's unlikely going to just one team run away with it. But it could happen. The one thing that I kind of cling some hope to is that actually Dyche is fed up with Everton, and I wouldn't blame him if he is. I think he's done a great job there. I don't think it's his fault, even though I've complained about some of his selections and his tactics. I mean, what's he got to work with? If he's still having to play Ashley Young, Michael Keane, I mean, the guy needs some backing, in my opinion. And I'm not sure the players they brought in are particularly that good. And yeah, he might just decide to throw it so he gets a payoff. I'm hoping so, although I don't know, then they might get a new manager bounce and go on a bit of a run, Everton. So for that reason, I'm going to go 1-0 to the Foxes. And yeah, look forward to the game. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Join me. I'm going to be helping out Blue Tinted Glasses for Match Day Live. And then we're going to have the instant match reaction also on this channel with Leicester City Down Under Luke. That'll be at 10 minutes past 5 on Saturday. Otherwise, hope you enjoyed the preview. Have a good one. Come on, you Foxes. Let's go.